Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Adobe Live. My name's Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe. Well, Senior Design Evangelist here at Adobe. Got my titles mixed up. Hope you're all doing well on this, what day is it? Thursday morning, afternoon, or evening. You can tell I haven't had enough coffee today. If you are tuning in live here on Behance, let me know in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from. We've got Anika and Gareth and Oliver and Carol. Great to see all of you. If you're on YouTube and you want to chat, head on over to behance.net/live/Adobe Live so I can see all of your fancy faces. All right, so today, all about Adobe Firefly. You may have heard of it. It's kind of making its rounds. And for me, what I'm really excited about is these tools that are going to enhance your creative workflows. Things like Generative Fill and Generative Recolor, and who knows what else might be coming up in the future. So you're going to be with me for about the next hour, and I would love your participation during this stream. If you want to give some suggestions on what we can potentially create using Adobe Firefly, definitely throw it in the chat. I will be taking a peek over from time to time. And we're going to start off with a little bit of an overview of what Adobe Firefly is. Then we're going to get into some examples on how you can use it to boost your workflow. So I'm going to go ahead and hop over to my screen. And this is where you can start your process. Firefly.adobe.com. Currently in beta. We don't have a time frame at the moment for when it's coming out of beta. But keep in mind that while it's in beta, no commercial use. So can't use the generations on products or anything that you're going to basically get paid for. Not yet. Once it's out of beta, that is definitely a possibility. All right, so we're going to start by exploring some of the various features that are available in Firefly at the moment, and things like text to image, generative fill, text effects, and then generative recolor. And as you can see at the bottom here, Firefly is also coming to many of the apps that you use on a daily basis. It's already found its way into the Photoshop beta, and there's a little bit inside of Illustrator as well. Carol's saying, such a cute little flying insect that glows in the dark. Oh, that might be a suggestion of what we can potentially create. Yeah, absolutely. And Noah's saying, tuning in from Germany, used generative AI in Photoshop yesterday for the first time and was impressed. Yeah, once I started using Generative Fill in Photoshop, that's when things really started to make sense. You know, we're going to explore text to image in a second, but if I'm being honest, like this isn't the end game. Generating things from a text prompt, it's fine, but it doesn't interest me that much. It's being able to use Generative Fill in Photoshop to enhance my workflow. That's what gets me really excited. So we have these specific features available right now, but we're also exploring a lot more. We're exploring how we can enter the world of 3D, right? 3D to image. So you can imagine a world where you're building a very basic object using 3D shapes, very basic 3D shapes, right? Carol's saying, no, Howard, that's what a Firefly is. That's true. But maybe we can generate one of those. I don't know. So you can, use basic 3D shapes to create something, and then you can use a little bit of a text prompt to build on that, which is really cool. Extend image. Now we can kind of do this in Photoshop now, and I'm going to show you that in just a few moments, but we want to make it easier, right? And then down here, personalized results, text to vector, text. There's just so much we can potentially do with Firefly and AI. And AI is moving so quickly. And, text to image, for example, the model that it's trained on is getting better daily. You're right. We're going to release updates as time goes on. It's going to get better and better and better. All right. So text to image. Let's start here. Again, like I mentioned, for me, not the end game, but it's definitely necessary to help train the model, work out bugs and things like that. So what is text to image? Well, as you can see it down at the bottom, there's a text field, right? And you're able to describe the image that you want to generate. And you can start off with some inspiration, like a unicorn in a magical grove, extremely detailed concept art, fantasy. And as you add on these additional prompts, you can really start to tweak your image and get exactly the result you're looking for. Maybe you want some sort of a background, right? So we can start off by going ahead and entering something down here. Maybe we want like an abstract background, vibrant colors, bold lines, right? and we press enter. Kingpin, great to see you, watching on TV, chatting on phone. Fancy, multitasking, right? So we get something like this. And, it's not bad. It's got a little bit of a painterly feel. But over to the right, that's kind of where we can start customizing our outputs, right? So we have it set to a square aspect ratio, and we can very easily just change this to, let's say, landscape. And this is kind of what sets Firefly apart from many of the other image generators is, these very easy to use tools on the right. Still dealing with that cough. If you remember in my last stream, just can't get rid of it. Very easy to use tools on the right-hand side, great UI, very easy. And then you can really dial this in. So maybe you want, instead of art, you might want graphic, and it's going to automatically regenerate that for you. And then down here at the bottom, you have some styles, right? So maybe you want, let's say, layered paper, for example. I can click on that and then regenerate, and it's going to generate something with layered paper, right? And what I found sometimes, and you're going to see this in a moment with another example, is, that's kind of cool, right? It's got some layered paper look to it. Maybe we'll get rid of bold lines, and we can enter, let's just try that. But what you're going to find sometimes is entering the style as well in the prompt will kind of give you some different results, right? So maybe in the style of layered paper. And sometimes that'll push it a little bit further and get you exactly the result that you're looking for. And we got something like this, which is interesting, right? Probably not something that I would necessarily use, but as you continue to tweak it, you might, right? And then from here, you can go ahead and you can download this image. It's going to download with a watermark. We are still in beta, so definitely keep that in mind. You can show similar, and you can also use Generative Fill, and you're going to see that in just a moment. But let's go in a different direction. Let's say you're working on a project, right? And you have a very specific image in mind that you maybe have browsed on Adobe Stock, you were looking for it, just couldn't find the exact image that you're looking for. So you might want to generate one of your own. Let me go ahead and clear the styles. And, if you've been following me on Twitter, I've been working on this, Vision Pro or spatial experience focused around golf. I've been getting into golf lately. So I might want something like maybe a wide angle shot of a golf course, something like that. We'll start off nice and simple, right? And I'm going to generate that. And by default, unless you add in something like a photo of whatever it is, it's going to generate either the content type for none or art, right? But over here to the right, we can kind of tweak that to our liking. I just saw a comment on YouTube. Is Firefly use a similar prompt language system with Midjourney and DALL-E, for example, ordering hyper-realistic to get images rather than real? So in a way, the prompts are a little bit different, but it uses the same kind of structure, right? You can use commas to separate your thoughts, and you definitely experiment with some of that stuff. But things like hyper-realistic sometimes works, but it's not going to result in the same sort of output that Midjourney offers. That's kind of why we have over to the right, we have these different content types, what I was just talking about, right? So if I switch this over to art, we're going to see a very different output than something like photo or graphic, right? So here in a second, here's kind of what art looks like. You can definitely tell it's a little bit more artistic. It's got some like brush strokes going on. And of course, down at the bottom, we can continue to modify that with, like, let's say a palette knife. And we're going to see the edges look a little bit different than the previous result, right? Kind of cool. So if you're looking for more of an artistic feel, you can go that way. Or if you're looking for, let's say, a photo, so I can switch this over to photo, and maybe I want a widescreen, so 16:9. I can very easily move in that direction. Kingpin says Midjourney is heavily filtered while Firefly is, yeah, it's a good point. Midjourney definitely has a very distinct style to its images, whereas Firefly, it's more of like, stock almost, right? I can definitely see something like this on a stock website. So we have a photo, pretty decent looking, and all this is generated. So it's not just going to a stock, website, grabbing an image and giving it to me, right? It's generating these, which is just wild. But down at the bottom, we can also control the color and the tone. And this goes back to what I was talking about earlier about the styles versus the prompt itself. If I switch this over down at lighting to, let's say, golden hour, what you're going to notice if I generate this is that some of the lighting gets a little bit warmer, but it might not get exactly what we're looking for, right? When I think of golden hour, I think of a sunset or a sunrise. And again, the lighting, if I go back and then forward, the lighting changed. It's a little bit warmer, but I might want that sunrise or sunset. So that's where the prompt really comes into play. So I can maybe either add a comma at sunrise, or I can just, wide angle shot of a golf course at sunrise, something like that, right? And we should see in a second a little bit more of a tweaked result. And there we go. And that's kind of more the direction that I'm looking for this particular image. And then up here, we can go ahead and show similar. So if I really like this particular image, I can click on this and it's going to give me 3 additional images that are in line with this one at the top right. And there we go, right? So they kind of have this similar look. Question from YouTube, can we talk about the angle and distance of an object inside of an image? So you sort of can. I added in here wide angle shot of a golf course, right? Now you can't define like an exact, at least I don't think so, like an exact distance, like 7 feet away, right? But if I change this to maybe aerial shot of a golf course at sunrise, right? We should see a much wider shot almost from above, hopefully. So you can kind of define things that way. There you go, right? And that's pretty cool. Like this shot over here, I don't know what these green patches are inside of the bunkers, but this one over here looks pretty good, right? We've got some water with some reflections. We've got some odd things over here to the right, but we're kind of moving in that direction. And speaking of odd things to the right, if there are areas that you don't necessarily like, let's say you love one photo, but maybe this photo here, you don't want this tree. What we can do is not only can we show similar, but we can access Generative Fill, this button right up here. And this is going to take us to our Generative Fill interface. And this will really allow us to either remove objects or insert new ones. So I can go ahead and maybe zoom in here. And I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller. And maybe I'll just brush out this tree, right? Just like that. And I'm going to go ahead and press remove and remove. And it's going to go through the process of removing that tree as seamlessly as possible. And there we go, right? And it gives us 4 options. And it did a pretty good job, not perfect, but it did a pretty good job at continuing that path along this particular area here. And it looks pretty good, right? Now, speaking of Generative Fill, if I go back here, back one more, right? We've got all these other options we're going to look at in a second, but Generative Fill, again, is one of my favorite features in Firefly, probably the favorite feature in Firefly. And what it allows you to do is allows you to swap out objects or remove objects very seamlessly. And I'm going to show you the difference between something like Content-Aware Fill and Generative Fill in just a moment when we hop into Photoshop. But if I go over into Finder for a moment, I've got some images here, all of them from Adobe stock, and we might want this image here. And I know I'm going to get yelled at very soon, but let's say for whatever reason, you want to remove all these dogs. Maybe you're a real estate photographer and you wanted a photo of the outside of this building, but all these dogs are just hanging out here. Probably going to get canceled for removing the dogs, but in the next example, I will add a dog just for you, right? So all we have to do is switch over to remove and just paint over the objects we want to remove, right? So I'm going to go ahead and just make a very sloppy selection, just like this. Anika saying, oh no, we are removing the cute dogs. I know. When I uploaded one of the videos for Generative Fill, when it first came out, by the way, I don't have my Twitter up here. I've been posting a lot of Generative Fill videos on Twitter, so definitely go follow me there. I got a lot of angry people. And I love dogs. I have a dog. But you know what? Sometimes you just got to remove them for your photos. Just reality, right? All right, so I've gone ahead and let me actually just remove this leash as well. So I've gone ahead and made a very sloppy selection or painting over top of these dogs, right? And that's the beauty of Generative Fill is you don't really have to make a nice, perfect selection. which is amazing, right? And all I'm gonna do is press remove. And it's gonna go through whatever algorithms and processes it has to go through. I don't understand any of it, but it's gonna do its thing. And in just a moment, it's just bananas, right? And it gives us it gives us 4 options. I mean, most of them are the same because it's basically just stairs, right? But it just blows my mind how this is possible, right? I can go ahead and keep that. If I hop over to Finder, right, this is the before, and this is the after. Removing these dogs previously, I mean, would still be a terrible thing because you're removing dogs, but removing these dogs previously would be a ton of work. But now you just paint over top of it and they're gone, right? Which is amazing. So let's do one more example. I did promise that I would add in a dog. So if I just pop this in here, we've got another image. And all I have to do now is go to the insert section over to the left. And I'm going to paint over top. Again, pretty sloppy, not focused on making a perfect selection. Obviously, this doesn't look like a dog, but I'm going to big, fluffy dog and go. Clever is saying it is astonishingly good. Astonishingly. Words are hard, right? But anyways, there we go. I mean, that one looks a little bit strange. That one's not bad. Not bad. There we go. That looks pretty good, right? And as I mentioned earlier, these models and algorithms are continuously getting better. Better and better and better. I don't know when the next version is going to be shipping, but it's definitely going to get better. So anything that you see that looks a little bit wonky is surely going to get better in future versions. You can add the same amount of dogs that you deleted. You probably could. I probably could. All right, so that's Generative Fill, and we're going to see that in action in Photoshop in just a few moments. Let's go back for a second. We've also got 2 more features that are available in beta right now. Text effects, which is kind of interesting. We did demo this, I think, at Adobe Max 2 years ago, possibly, or maybe last year. I don't know time anymore. But it allows you to create these really fun text effects for basically whatever you're looking to do. So if I wanted to do something like, so I can enter the text here, maybe the word pop, and then popcorn, and it's going to generate text from popcorn, which is kind of fun. You know, it's definitely a niche feature. You might not need this all the time, but you've got some, you know, fun text effects using popcorn. And over to the right, very similar to text to image, you can control your output, right? So you have some sample prompts over here at the top. Then you have some, you know, text effect fits. So if you do tight, it's going to, those popcorn, the kernels are going to be much closer to the actual text, where if you do something like loose, you might see a few popcorns kind of spraying across the document. And in just a moment, so they're kind of, you know, a little bit more out, as you can see over here. And then you can change the font as well. So if you wanted maybe a thicker font, I can choose this one. And in just a moment, that's a fun thing about these generations is when you're doing this live, you have to kind of talk a little bit while these things are generating. But that's kind of cool, right? I don't know when I would use this particular piece of text, but if you do need something like popcorn text for whatever reason, you can make it very easily. Whereas before, making something like this would be incredibly difficult. And then finally, we have our newest feature in Firefly, Generative Recolor. So you can imagine a world where you have spent a ton of time in Illustrator or, you know, whatever vector application you use, and you've created this beautiful image. So if I hop over to Finder for a moment, now I've got this image. I licensed it from Adobe stock because I'm a terrible illustrator, but I've got this great image, and you know, I would imagine the artist spent a ton of time choosing colors, making, you know, the birds and the flamingo. That's what that is. I swear, when I'm streaming, my mind just goes blank. You know, and then you get to the point where you want a different feel to this image. So you can either go into Illustrator, and if I hop over to Illustrator here, you can either go in and, you know, select every single object and make some changes. I can double click in here and change this to maybe blue, for example, right? That one, okay, maybe over here. See, you can tell I don't use Illustrator very often. You get the idea, right? There we go. I don't know why it didn't work the first time, but you can change every single layer to a new color, or you can use something like generative recolor. So if I hop back over to Finder, currently in the firefly.adobe.com beta, you have to upload an SVG. So again, back in Finder, I do have this SVG. I'm going to pop that in there. And then I can describe the color palette that I'm looking for. So I can do something like pastel colors, right? And it's going to generate new colors vector based on my prompt, right? So I have all these different options that I can kind of cycle through. Or over to the right, we have some additional options. So trippy disco. That's kind of fun, right? Little vibrant colors, summer by the something or other. If I want like a darker feel to it, I can definitely do that. So there's all these different options. And then I can choose, harmony settings at the bottom. And I can kind of just go through that process. And if I like it, I can download the result. It downloads as an SVG, so it's all vector, which is amazing. And I can continue my work. Now, speaking of generative recolor, it's now also available directly in Illustrator, which I'll show you very quickly. Then we're going to hop over to Adobe Express for a moment. But here I am back in Illustrator. And if I want the same process, right? Let's say I'm working in Illustrator. SVG sounds like some kind of disease, I suppose. I might want to recolor this. Again, I spent a ton of time working on this, and I just want to shift the colors a little bit. So previously, if you go to under the edit menu, edit colors, we had recolor artwork, which allows you to kind of move these, dismiss that, move these things around, and we should probably select the right layer. That would be nice. Or I can just do that, I think, right? Edit colors, recolor artwork. That's a bit better, right? So I can shift these around and I can get different colors. But if I wanted something very specific, I can hop into generative recolor. Let me reset that. And I can do the same thing. I can either choose the options down here at the bottom. And it's going to give me some new color palettes. That one's kind of nice, actually, right? It's got a little bit of a washed out look to it, but it's kind of nice. Or I can enter, maybe let's say cyberpunk. So I can generate, cyberpunk colors for this particular artwork very easily. And all of this is vector. So all these colors are applied directly to the layers. I can just continue diving in and making changes very simply, right? All right, let's hop back over for a second to Adobe Express. So Adobe Express is, I believe, the newest property to have Firefly built into it. So down here at the bottom, we've got text to image, which you just saw, and text effects. These work exactly the same as I showed you on the firefly.adobe.com website. So I'm not going to show you that here, but you can very easily get started with your Express projects by entering what you want to generate over here to the left for text to image or text effects and going on your way. But it's also built into your workflow. So let's say you're working on an Instagram post, for example. Let's start off with a template. So I'm going to hop in here, and maybe this image over here looks really cool. I want to start off with that, and I can start editing my work, right? Let's say I want to change this to fancy style radar, or let's change this to, I don't know, whatever it might be. There we go. But, I'm liking the image in the foreground, but I think I might want something a little bit different in the background. I think the background could be a little bit more colorful. So if I dive into our layers over here to the right-hand side and select that background, I can generate something new. So if I hop over to our media section, right over here on the left-hand side, we now have a text to image option. So I can dive in here, and this is square, so I'm going to choose square. And let's say I want a brick wall with colorful graffiti. I did not spell that right, but there we go. And photo is good, and generate. So now it's going to do the same thing that we did before. It's going to generate an image based on my text prompt. And in a moment, we've got a few different options. Ooh, that one looks pretty fancy. That one there. I definitely like this one, so I'm going to go ahead and make this larger just like that, and then make sure to move it behind my main subject. And now we have a nice new colorful background that we were able to generate. Now, obviously, in Express, we do have options. If we hop over to media, we can browse. So there might be a brick photo with graffiti on it that we can just search for, right? Brick wall. So there's something like this down at the bottom. But if you don't find exactly what you're looking for, that's kind of when text to image really comes into play. I wanted something very specific, a brick wall with colorful graffiti. Maybe I didn't find it in the stock library that is available within Adobe Express, so I generated one of my own, which is incredibly cool, right? And I can go ahead and continue editing this Instagram post. I can export it, download it. I can even use the post scheduler directly on Adobe Express to schedule it to post on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever it might be. All right, so text to image and text effects inside of Adobe Express as well. Now, I want to hop into Photoshop because that's kind of where, again, for me, that's where the excitement really happens. Let me hop over to Photoshop, and I have a ton of examples I want to go through on how generative fill in Photoshop can really help streamline your workflow, which is really what this is all about. It's about making tedious processes a little bit simpler, or sometimes a lot simpler. So we have this image here, and you may have seen some of these examples on some of the posts that I've uploaded to Twitter and YouTube. But we've got this photo from Adobe Stock, and you can imagine a world where you're a photographer. You took a photo of this group of people over here to the left, but this guy over here to the right wasn't part of the group. So he needs to be removed. Maybe you don't have a photo, like a license, a waiver from this guy to include him inside of your images, right? So you want to get rid of him. Now, previously, what you would probably do, I mean, there are a lot of different ways we can do this, but I want to start off with my, if I hop over here, my object selection tool. And when I choose that, it's going to look at the photo, analyze all the objects, and I can go ahead and very easily click on this guy, right? And maybe I might want to expand the selection a little bit to give Photoshop a little bit more room to work with. So let's try about 10. That's not bad. Now, previously, what you would likely do is head up to the edit menu, go down to either fill or content aware fill, and then choose content aware and press OK. And it did an okay job, right? Some of the areas don't look too bad, but some of the areas, especially over here, it just mangles it. Because what content aware fill does is when you have a selection like this and you choose content aware fill, it's going to look at the surrounding area. So it's probably looking at, this area right around here. It's looking at the lighting, the shadows, the textures, and it's using that information to fill the subject in, right? In this case, it's this runner. So it doesn't really understand the photo. So it kind of makes that jumbled mess, as you can see here. Now, you could also dive in and grab something like your clone stamp, right? Make a sample and start painting this in here, and you might get somewhere. But the problem that you're going to run into with either the clone stamp or the spot healing brush or the healing brush is that it doesn't blend in perfectly. Now, the healing brush will help a little bit, but the bigger issue in this particular example is that this fence in the background, at least I think it's a fence, has perspective to it. And using the traditional healing methods is very difficult when it comes to perspective and things like that. So let's go back to the time where we selected this subject and we expanded that selection. Now we're going to use generative fill. And when you're trying to remove something from a photo, you don't have to enter anything in. You can leave this blank and then you press generate. And it's going to go through the process very similar to what we saw on the generative fill feature on firefly.adobe.com. And it's going to work its magic. And it's taking a little bit longer because it's analyzing not just the surrounding area, but the entire photo, right? And we have a few different options, but that first one looked pretty good. And if you remember the first example, the jumbled mess in the background, we have none of that, right? We have our before and we have our after. And you can really see that it's understanding the building. It's understanding the fence that's kind of moving into the background. It's understanding that the light post has areas at the bottom that just weren't there before, right? So it's understanding the entire photo to get a feel for the lighting, the shading, but also the objects that are present in this photo, which is incredible, right? So removing objects using generative fill is just game changer, right? So if I hop over to this example here, we have this deer or buck or whatever this thing is. I don't know animals very well. But again, removing the foreground object would be pretty difficult in the past. We could grab, let's say, maybe we'll do our healing brush tool. Let me make this a little bit larger. And this area up here, if I go ahead and sample and start brushing this away, I probably should be doing this on a new layer, but that's okay. So this is pretty fine, right? And over here, also not bad. I can very easily go through and make those changes. But when we get to this area here, we have the area of the animal that kind of curves, and you could go ahead and hop into your window menu and then down to clone source, and you can actually rotate your clone source a little bit as well. So can I remove the deer in my video After Effects? You could remove the deer, and not in After Effects, but you can definitely do it using Generative Fill, right? Question from YouTube. When is it going to be higher res? That's a good question. Again, like I mentioned earlier, additional models are being trained, so that's very possible in the future that the resolution does get increased. But we're still in beta, so we're still, training additional models and tweaking things on the back end. So as time goes on, I'm sure that stuff will improve. So it's a tedious process, especially when you get to areas that curve a little bit. And down here, there's not much information to work with. So let's go back and let's try Generative Fill for this example. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my lasso tool. Again, you don't need a very complex selection. So I'm going to very easily just draw around here like that, go down there. There we go. And I'll also include most of the legs at the bottom and just like that. Now, like the last example, Generative Fill, we don't have to enter anything in this text field, and we're going to press Generate. And what I would imagine is happening now in the background is it's understanding that this is a deer or a buck or whatever this animal is, and it's generating what it believes to be the rest of this animal. And the legs are a little bit weird in that example. This one, it's a little bit better. But that's the beauty of having these additional variations that you can kind of cycle between. Or if you wanted something a little bit different, you can generate again or enter something very specific inside of the text field. But just in a matter of seconds, we've removed the antler or the horn or whatever it is from the foreground, giving us a much better looking photo. Of course, if that's the result that you're looking for, right? Which is incredible. Let's move on to the next example. This one I posted on Twitter. And this is, I think, where a technology like this really comes into play. We've got, hey, I'm recording, great to see you. We've got, a photo that we may have taken in, I don't know where this is, but you might be on vacation. And you took a great photo, but there's people in the background. And, sometimes you might want the people in the background because it makes it more real. But there are times where you just want those people gone, right? So what I'm going to do is, just like the last example, I'm going to grab my lasso tool and make a very simple selection around these tourists in the background. I'll select a little bit of this guy's pants. That's totally fine. You know what? I'm going to leave some of the pigeons in because why not? There we go, and boop, just like that. And what I'm also going to do is I'm going to add to the selection on the right-hand side. So I'm going to hold down my Shift key on my keyboard and add to my selection. Again, doesn't have to be a fancy selection. Could be pretty sloppy. I'm going to get a little bit of her boots and her legs, just like that, and there we go. So I have two selections, one on the right-hand side, one on the left-hand side. Both contain the tourist that we want to remove, Generative Fill, and Generate. Make sure you're not accidentally removing his pants. Definitely not. Of course, you can change the style of his pants using Generative Fill, but you won't be able to remove his pants completely. We do have some not safe for work filters, which is always nice. But in just a moment, the tourists are gone. I'm sure many of you have tried to do this in the past in Photoshop. You know how long something like this would have taken, especially considering the background is blurred. So matching the blur back there, and you don't have a lot to work with, right? Especially in this area here, you have a few of these little arches, but you don't have a lot to work with. So, using the clone stamp or using your healing brushes, there's just not a lot to sample. But with Generative Fill, it just understands, even with the little information of the arches that was available, it just understands the photo and it does whatever it needs to do that, right? It's just incredible. Now, I did mention that you can adjust the prompt if you wanted to. So if you wanted to leave it blank to remove the photo, to remove whatever is in the selection, you can absolutely do that. But what if you wanted maybe a lot of pigeons? Maybe you want to replace the people with pigeons. You can very easily enter a new prompt inside of your properties panel over to the right. And in just a moment, we should see quite a few more pigeons. It's not bad, right? Some of the pigeons are a little bit strange, but if you get a result that looks really bad, you can definitely rate it. You can good result, poor result, or if something just looks completely wrong, maybe it's not safe for work, for somehow it slipped through, you can report that result as well. But I think I want to go for just this result, nice and simple, nice and clean, matches the blur in the background. It's quite fancy. All right. Another example, kind of moving on from the removing photos example, you might want to replace some objects. So maybe you've licensed a photo from Adobe Stock, or you've taken a photo, and maybe you're working with a client or you're working with the model here, and you just want to make a few tweaks to the photo for whatever reason, right? So here we've got a bowl of fruit. Maybe you decide fruit is too healthy. You want to replace that with ice cream, right? Why not? So again, I'm going to grab my lasso tool, and I'm going to make a selection around this bowl of fruit, including the fork on the left-hand side. I'm going to leave some room at the top. There we go. Now, this time, we're going to press Generative Fill, and we're going to type in, let's say, ice cream with sprinkles. And we're going to generate. And we're going to see what happens. And the beauty of Generative Fill and AI is you just don't know what's going to happen. Every result is going to be different. So it could be great, it could be poor. Who knows, right? Some of them are not bad. Maybe I don't want the sprinkles, right? Maybe I just want ice cream. So I'll generate again and we'll see what happens. Captain Crunch. Now, Captain Crunch won't. We could enter cereal, but Captain Crunch is trademarked. We do not train on trademarked information. So, and this one's not bad. The spoon's a little bit small, but for the most part, we've got a pretty decent looking result. Change the fruit into fries. Okay, let's see what happens. Let's just try fries. We'll keep our prompts nice and simple, and we'll see. Change the fruit to Fruit Loops. Again, probably Fruit Loops won't work, but we can probably describe something similar to Fruit Loops, and that would probably work. Generative Fill for cleaning a picture is really impressive. It is. It really. Look at that. We got fries. Now, I don't know why she's eating fries with a fork, but you know what? We're going to run with it. I think that's kind of fun. Now, what about this drink over here to the right-hand side? Maybe we want to replace that with a coffee. I'll use a very simple marquee selection. And we'll just enter, you know what? We'll just keep it simple. Coffee. There we go. Got to describe the fork. We probably have to either remove the fork. I mean, we probably could remove the fork. Now, I'll try that in a second. But knowing that hands don't generate that well at the moment, of course, it will get better. We might get some weirdness going on, but you know what? Just for you, who was it? Kingpin. Just for you, we're going to try to remove the fork. I'm expecting a poor result, but I'll try to keep it simple. I probably could use the object selection tool for something like this, but you know what? We're going to use the lasso tool. I don't know why I'm doing this to myself because I know the result probably won't be very good. But there we go. We've selected the fork. Generative Fill, and let's just go ahead and generate. I'm scared. I know this is not going to turn out very well, but you know what? You have to try it, right? And it'll be good to compare this. We're in beta. Probably all of you are following along and you broke it. I'm kidding. But we're in beta, right? So I know that this particular workflow is going to get better as time goes on. Let's try one more time. Let's see if the demand has. This is also the fun of doing this live, is if the servers are overloaded because we're in beta. And another thing that beta is being worked on, because we selected a lot of skin, things just don't work sometimes. But we're in beta. Things are going to be improving. They're going to be tweaking the filters. And sometimes if you continue to generate, you'll get something, because it'll notice that the fork is the main subject. And sometimes if you enter a prompt, it'll help a little bit. Yeah, that one didn't work. Let's try remove the fork. Even though, this particular Generative Fill doesn't understand English. Like, it's not, what's it called? The language learning model. But let's see what happens. Maybe in 2 sections, possibly. That's a good, that's not bad. Okay, that one's not bad. Her hand looks a bit strange in that particular position, but it's not bad, right? I think we're going to keep the fork there. All right, before we move on, let's add one more object, maybe in the background. We might want maybe a bowl of fruits back there, right? So if I go ahead and select this area here, it's probably going to be a very large bowl of fruits. Bowl of fruits. And we're going to generate. I use a fork to eat fries when possible. Am I too fancy? You use a fork to eat fries? I mean, I probably have at some point, but look at that. Look at that bowl of fruit. But I want you to understand what happened here, right? Of course, we could add a bowl of fruit. We could license a photo from Adobe stock, and we can grab a bowl of fruits, and then we'd have to figure out the blur. But you're probably noticing what's going on right now. The Generative Fill, the model it's been trained on, it understands the blur. So it's not just looking at this area here, it's looking at the entire background. And it's figuring out the amount of blur that's back there. And it's, in the fruit that it generated, it matched the blur. Like, it's hard for me to explain this because it's so wild how this stuff works. And I don't even understand how it works on like the engineering side. There's some very smart people working on this stuff. But it's amazing how it's able to do this, matching the blur. It's just a bowl of lemons for good luck. I mean, you could probably do that too. But I do want to move on to another example. This example you may have seen before. We might get back to it. But let's go ahead and hop over to what's next. This one here. So I talked a little bit about the fact that if I hop over to Safari for a moment, and I hop into Firefly, we are working on a tool to help you extend images on, Firefly, right? But in Photoshop right now, you can do that as well using Generative Fill. So we've got this image here, it was taken vertically, but you might want a horizontal version of the photo. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my crop tool, and I'm going to extend this image out. Now, in the past, if I hop up to the top before I accept my crop, we have the content aware option, right? Give her a cookie, possibly. So we have the content aware option, which very similar to content aware fill in our first example. It's going to look, once we accept this, which I haven't done yet, it's going to look at basically the edges of this photo. It's going to kind of look at the shading, the textures, the lighting, and it's going to try its best to fill the missing parts in. So if I go ahead and press OK, we're going to probably get a weird result, right? There's a lot of repetition because it's basically taking parts of the image and then filling in the rest. It doesn't understand the image, right? It doesn't understand that these are mountains with trees and there's a boat over here at the bottom with a person in it. It just doesn't work. So instead, we're going to extend this out just like that. We are not going to use content aware fill. We're going to use the default so it gives us a nice transparent area. And I'm going to use my marquee tool to simply select this area. I'm going to also add a little bit of the, as you can see here, a little bit of the original image, so it has a little bit more information to work with. It's not necessary because Generative Fill does analyze the entire image, but it helps a little bit. And I'm going to hold down Shift and select this area as well on the left. And Generative Fill, if we wanted something very specific in those filled out areas, we can go ahead and enter that here or press Generate. And just like all the other examples, it's analyzing the image, it's understanding that there are mountains and a boat in the foreground, who knows what else, maybe the sky in the background, and I have no words, right? It's just incredible how it's able to do something like this. And this kind of goes back to what one of the commenters was asking earlier about the resolution. You can definitely see a little bit of a difference, right? Here, higher resolution, here's a bit lower resolution, because I think at the moment it's maxed out at 1024 pixels, possibly. Now, my good friend Jesus Ramirez gave a really interesting idea and workaround for this, is you can generate these things in steps. So if I go up here and maybe selected just this area here, and then generate, and it's a bit more of a tedious process, but if you really needed the resolution to match more closely, you can definitely do this in steps, and you're going to get, slightly higher resolution results. Slightly, right? It's still not matching perfectly, but compared to this, we definitely see higher resolution, right? And especially if you zoom out to, 100%, it's matching a little bit. So Kingpin's saying 1024 in Photoshop, 2000 on the web. That's good to know. But again, the model's continuously improving, so I would imagine, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that higher resolution is coming in the future. All right, bonkers, right? All right, let's go ahead and by the way, you can also combine this with something like sky replacement. All right, let's go ahead and move on to another example. This lion or leopard, cheetah, I don't know what it is. You can tell I have no idea about animals. Extend this out. And this example really shows how Generative Fill is understanding the image. So I'm going to do this exact same thing. And there's very little of the actual animal here. Cheetah, lion, leopard thing. There's very little that's being selected. So it would have to understand the entire image in order to extend this image properly and give us a decent result. Big kitty. You know what? You're not wrong. Maybe I'll run with that. It is a big cat. Every time I do this, I get blown away. It used to be in the good old days when we did demos for like content-aware fill, right? We would have to be so specific about the assets that we used because naturally, content-aware fill is going to work on some things, but it's just not going to work on other things. If I tried content-aware fill on this particular example, and edit, fill, content-aware fill, get ready, right? Jaguar, possibly, maybe. Content-aware fill. It's just not. But now, Generative Fill, because it understands the image, we're just left with much better looking results. And much is an understatement, right? We've got this, which is, I don't know what this is, and then this. And then we've got this little guy, right? I posted this on Instagram. Go follow me there as well. It's an interesting example, right? I licensed this on Adobe Stock. And I thought, where's the rest of this dog? It's a fun photo, right? But what would happen if we tried to generate the rest of it? Let's find out. Let's do a little bit at a time. And I'm going to generate and run this. Again, it's understanding the photo. And it does whatever it needs to do to fill in the rest. Noah says, I'd also say Jaguar. Okay, Jaguar it is. Or Big Kitty. Look at that. But we can continue this. I'm going to make this even longer. Generate. Let's see what happens. Noah saying, I think I saw this on Twitter, this dog example. Yeah, I posted this on, I think, Twitter and Instagram, and that one didn't work, but that one did. And all of a sudden, we have a completely new photo, right? We started with this, and we just generated the rest of this photo. And maybe we can even go sideways. I don't know. Can we? I don't know. Let's find out. We're having fun with this. At some point, there just won't be anything else to generate because there's a black background behind it. But maybe it'll just add other dogs. I don't know. Look at that. Beautiful. Here it added a bit of a background, right? And speaking of background, what we can do is we can actually, let's go ahead and convert this to, we can either rasterize the layers or convert it to a smart object. We can select the subject, and then we can invert the selection, and then generate a new background. So let's say blurred dog park. Let's see what happens here. Hey, Sean, great to see you. Let's see what happens. And then we're probably going to wrap up with one more example, a little bit more extreme. And it may, that one's not bad, a little bit better. But of course, you can continue to tweak it, experiment with different prompts, but it's not bad, right? I think I like the black background a little bit better. All right, this last example is probably going to break my computer. And if my stream dies, you probably know why, because I've tried this off stream and the fans on my MacBook Pro were just going bananas. So there's this idea that you can continuously expand an image using Generative Fill. So if I go ahead and maybe, make this a little bit larger. What did I just do? I think it's already trying to explode. Right? Make this a little bit larger. And let's just select the image. Maybe I'll bring it in a little bit, say by 5 pixels, and then inverse the selection, and then generate. And the idea is you would just continue doing this. You would crop, make it a little bit larger, crop at Generative Fill, crop, make it a little bit larger, and continue that process until who knows what, right? There we go. And I started with a fairly small image, but as you continue doing this, like right now the image is 2000 by 1400. As you continue doing this, the image is going to get larger and larger and larger. All right, and I'm going to invert the selection. Generative Fill. Maybe we'll add in something like a cobblestone path. We'll start adding a little bit of prompts. You go as fast as your CPU can take it, basically. And also have, I also have all these other images open, and I have that didn't really. Well, I mean, there it kind of did. Okay, that's something that we can work with. I also have Illustrator. You know what? I'm going to close Illustrator because I know it's going to probably destroy everything. All right, let's make it a little bit bigger. Now we have a little bit of a cobblestone path. What we can do now is basically invert the selection and then let Generative Fill kind of take over. And I'm sure if you didn't enter any prompts throughout this whole process, it would eventually start adding things in rather than just the flowers. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Let's just make it much larger. What are we at now? 5,000 by 3,600. Okay, not too bad. It's doable. Generative Fill, generate. 1024 by 1024 is the largest size generated, so you lose pixels. Yeah, I mean, as you continue going up, the quality is going to get a little bit. It's interesting. I don't know if I don't know if this is going to work, but let's say a castle. Yeah, the quality is going to degrade a little bit as you continue making your image larger and larger. Eventually, you're going to get to like 15,000 pixels, and it's going to take a hit. Stream ends when Photoshop crashes. Oh, that looks not good. I mean, that's a little bit better. It's an overhead shot, right? So we're kind of getting there. It doesn't make sense, but let's do one more before we wrap this up. And we're going to make this one much larger, just to see if we can break everything. Invert, Generative Fill, and generate. Let's see what happens. I don't know what's going to happen. It probably won't make sense, whatever is about to happen. But we're going to see. Hopefully my stream is still going. My computer is, let's see, what's my 70% right now? Okay. Yeah, it doesn't make sense. But if you want to make something like very abstract, you can, I mean, this, But anyways, once you continue to enlarge and enlarge and enlarge, you'll have this image that's so large, you can just continue to zoom in and you'll eventually get to this nice high resolution image. So you can make this nice animation that kind of zooms in and you get to, a fancy looking image. But anyways, before my computer completely crashes, there we go. I'm going to wrap things up. Hope you all enjoyed this stream. Definitely experiment with generative fill, generative recolor, text to image, all this fun stuff. Share your results on Twitter. I'd love to see what you create, especially if you do something like this and your computer doesn't explode. I would love to see it. So definitely tweet at me at Pinsky. Stick around. We've got more content coming up throughout the day, and I will see you all next time. Thanks, everyone.